2 weeks before her TED Talk, her husband told her he wanted a divorce. Dr. Stephanie Barnes had done everything right. Harvard Law, big career, mom, wife. She played by all the rules. And in one conversation, everything she thought was supposed to happen. But here's what she learned. It was a disruption, not a derailment. And she had a choice. Let it destroy her life completely or let it elevate her life. She chose elevation. And now she's the liberated lawyer. And she tells you something most people never figure out.
I know that you are wanting to do that out of fear. Helping me to recognize that I should never settle for less. You have to be willing to advocate, and you've got to be willing to take a chance and take a risk. It is antithetical for a society to say that this particular part of society is supreme or has greater value or is more capable when there's no competition. My ex-husband announced he wanted a divorce, and that was a major disruption in my life because that wasn't supposed to happen. But the more I went through the process, I realized that this disruption was just that, a disruption, and I had a choice. I could allow it to derail my life completely, or I could allow it to elevate my life. Who we are, or who we've always been, is not static. It doesn't have to. Because I think the first thing that we have to do is to ditch the idea of a happily ever after. There is no happily ever after. There is the life you create for yourself.
There's no happily ever after. There's only the life you create for yourself. Guarantee you, this conversation with Stephanie will change how you see the disruptions in your life. The conversation starts now, so let's do it. What I like to start with is telling us who you are and what you're doing.
I am Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, the Liberated Lawyer. I'm a healthcare innovation attorney, but I'm always the Liberated Lawyer. It is a season where I have learned more than my job, more than a position. The concept of liberation is something you can embrace in any season, and definitely in this season. I hail from Mississippi, and I've lived here in Atlanta for about 8 years. I am committed to being fulfilled, fit, and free. That's how I like it.
It was a journey to get to where you are right now.
Yes. So I got my law degree from Harvard in 97. I was an English major in undergrad. I graduated from Tougaloo College. And with an English degree, well, you've got to do something. You've either got to go to grad school or law school. I was intrigued with becoming a lawyer and decided to go to law school. I was the first person from Tougaloo to go to Harvard Law School in 20 years. When I was presented with the opportunity to apply there, I didn't think I'd get in. From Mississippi, Harvard. At that time, I think it was number 2. Yale and Harvard were kind of little rivals here. Right. We're still number 2, I think, but that's okay. I applied to about 6 law schools. Harvard, of course, was on the list, and I was like, well, it won't hurt to apply. And I applied, and I got in. So I had a very good experience at Harvard. Looking back, as a matter of fact, I just got back from Celebration of Black Alumni, which is a reunion of Black law graduates from Harvard Law School. The thing that made that experience the best was the Black Law Students Association, because it gave me a place to connect and a place to find people who were on the same journey that I was. Didn't know any lawyers before I went to law school. What I knew about law was Matlock and LA Law. Of course, real law is nothing like that. Right. And when I first got to Harvard, after the first year, I was like, I don't think I really want to be a lawyer. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I wanted to do instead. The first daughter, the first granddaughter, and I have taken on a lot of responsibility with that. I just didn't want to quit law school and not have a plan, so I stuck it out. The biggest change that I made was going from litigation, where you go to trial, which is what I saw on TV, to being a transactional lawyer. So I have practiced transactional law for most of my career. Success rate, I argued one motion for summary judgment. It was granted. And so after that, I was like, you know what, I'm done. So there we go. But I started out in like energy and environmental. And the goal was for me to do of the energy side, or the environmental side, which is more transactional. Environmental law, though, is as sexy as watching paint dry. When I started out at Mississippi State, I wanted to be a chemical engineer. I quickly realized that didn't really fit my personality either. So environmental law wasn't going to fit it either. I transferred to the health law section, and that's what got me on the journey to where I am now. I practiced transactional health law, regulatory work for the first 6.5 years of my career, then moved to the Mississippi Gulf Coast and became the chief compliance officer for a health system there. That allowed me to grow in several different ways because in a small health system, the kind of law that I practice is very specialized. In a small legal community, there weren't many big firms that did health law transactional work. So the hospital clients, that was it. We all had outside counsel. So there was only so much I could grow. And I'm always looking for an opportunity to expand, and quickly noticed that I was the only Black woman at the table and desired to have more women at the table and definitely more people of color. And so I got on this journey of developing leaders. I wanted to be a leader, better leader myself. And I wanted to see more women in the leadership pipeline. I started this leadership development program, and over about 5 seasons, about 100 women went through that, and about a quarter of them went on to either become VPs in the company, directors, or leaders elsewhere. So that's something I'm very, very proud of.
That's outstanding.
It's very rewarding. That desire to see more women at the table put me on the path that I am now, because it led me to getting my PhD in organizational leadership. I wanted to learn more so that I could be a more effective faculty member. I wanted to develop actually a broader people development program in conjunction with the human resources team. And that led me down this path of developing others. And I started to coach. I retired from law at one point because I had gone as far as I could in that company. I wanted to pursue leadership development, either as a consultant, also as a speaker and a coach. And so I went on that path.
Why'd you pick Harvard?
I just believe that if you really want to go for something, even though it may seem difficult or out of reach to go for it, Yale was number 1, Harvard was number 2 in the country in terms of how law schools were ranked. I think that ranking still is pretty consistent. NYU was actually, I really wanted to go to NYU. I thought I could get in there. I love New York City. Applied to Duke, Emory, and that was it. Chose Harvard or applied to Harvard and Yale. I'm like, why not? The worst thing that can happen is I apply and I don't get in, but I definitely won't get in if I don't apply. So, of course, when I got accepted, I did not get accepted to Yale, but I did get accepted to Harvard. And I think even had I gotten accepted to Yale, I would have gone to Harvard. Yale is a smaller law school, and Harvard, I think, has broader opportunities for students. But once I was accepted, I'm like, forgetting NYU, I'm going to Harvard. Because it was the best, one of the best opportunities for me, and I was given an opportunity, I'm like, I'm going to go for it.
I've heard that quite a bit, and I feel the same way. There's something about being a Harvard lawyer. If you go worldwide, you mention Harvard, Harvard Law, everybody knows it. I think in the people's mind, it's a people's champ. You also mentioned the fact that no one else from the town's been there, which is always interesting. You're coaching women. Was there any opportunity to help folks look at a similar path? What I like about what you talked about is what's the best, right? And whatever, quote unquote, they say is the best, that's what I'm going to do. Did folks take that path, or what was your experience with that?
Because generally, when I coach women and anyone that I've developed, my focus is on allowing your imagination to lead. Many times we do what everyone else is doing simply because that's what we know. We do what our parents have done, what people we look up to in our community, or what our friends or colleagues are doing. Life has so much more to offer than what we see every day. And I'll tell you a very impactful moment, like during my leadership journey, when I was starting to become a better leader. I read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, Think and Grow Rich. What he talks about is he begins with imagination. When you allow yourself to imagine, you allow yourself to dream and expand your capacity, because you are looking beyond just what is and thinking about what can be. Regardless of what path a woman may be on, whether she wants to go to law school, be an executive, start her own business, or just be better in her own life, it has to start with, what are you dreaming about?
Yeah.
What can you imagine? And so one of the exercises that I do when I work with women, it's called a New You Transformational Intensive. And that is a structured one-on-one coaching activity where they are able to draw the path, they walk away with a blueprint they want to do. But we begin with understanding where they are and where they'd like to go. And one of those exercises is having a conversation with your future self.
Yes.
It sounds silly, and I always tell them, yeah, this may sound a little silly, but it's very powerful because it activates your imagination.
Absolutely.
In the gym, I listen to meditations and books instead of music sometimes. I'm listening to a meditation now, Bob Proctor on abundance. He says over and over again, if you can see it in your head, you can hold it in your hand. That type of thinking allows us to really expand our capacity, because if we only look at the path we see before us, what we see around us, what we know, we're going to have a very limited view on life.
Yes.
But when we allow ourselves to imagine
the
possibilities, that really does have a psychological trigger that allows our minds to expand. And it breeds this belief that what we desire is truly possible.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, there's a book called The Science of Scaling into that same principle you're speaking to. Why go after Harvard? Why go after the best? Why go after the best in whatever you're doing? Why shoot for the stars? It wires us.
Yes.
Because our subconscious can't tell the difference between whether it's real or not.
Right.
And so part of that wiring is you dream these big, impossible, wild, hairy goals, and you start to rewire yourself to chase them.
Right.
In Gladwell's book, he looks at it from the other standpoint. He talks about the Kennedys, for example. How does something like that just become an entitlement where no one asks, are you going to college?
It's an expectation.
What Ivy League college are you going to choose? Or when it comes to their career, are you going to go to law school? So you create, even within your family, within the folks around you, within your family, within the network, within the 100 women, creating this culture, being able to envision or dream or the bigger dreams, right? And I think it's a huge part of it. So you're going through your career, you're a Harvard lawyer, as you said, in terms of African-American women, you're in a lot of rooms by yourself. Where did the support come from? Do you have folks who really help take that Harvard lawyer and help you become that better lawyer?
Yes, and I would say it began with the advisor that I had in college, Dr. Horvath, Dr. John Horvath. He was my English professor and encouraged me. He wrote many of my recommendation letters to get into college, and he pushed me to even apply in the first place. I remember when I had just a little moment of doubt, I came in and I said, as a backup, I want you to write me a letter of recommendation to the University of Mississippi. Ole Miss Law School. And this is no shade on that school, good school. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm like, well, why not? He's like, because I know that's not where you want to go. I know that you are wanting to do that out of fear.
Right.
And so that was very influential in helping me to recognize that I should never settle for less. The summer before I started at Harvard, I did this internship program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, SEO. They would put Black students in Wall Street law firms and investment banking firms in New York City. As a recent graduate from Greenville, Mississippi, I went to the Big Apple all by myself. This was before cell phones, before GPS. And I went there that summer by myself, and it was a grand adventure. But there was an attorney, Marcia Narayan, who was also a Harvard graduate. She is from Miami, from Florida. She was the first contact I had with another Black woman attorney in the transactional space. She was at a Wall Street, New York law firm. That's big time in terms of the opportunities there. And I also met Kathy Hampton. She actually lives here in Atlanta. But these were two Black women attorneys. Both had gone to Harvard, and they showed me what was possible. And so using their example, I was able to develop a sense of identity for myself in terms of what I could do and what I wanted to do. So those are three very pivotal influences at the beginning of my career. Once I became an attorney, the Next big influence is actually a good dear friend of mine, Shauna Johnson Clark. She is a former international managing partner of a law firm in Houston. She was a fourth-year associate when I came through as a summer intern. And we're close friends, so I got to see up close and personal how one can achieve excellence in your career.
You got a model.
Yes, had
Nice.
a role model. And she wasn't just someone I worked with. We became and still are very close friends. So they were very pivotal. The more I went along, though, I became the only one in the room. I was very fortunate to have connections with, quite frankly, white men who were willing to sponsor me. Larry, he was a partner at the second law firm I worked in, and he would help me and ensure that I got challenging clients, challenging work, and would really sew into me. When I became chief compliance officer, it was just me. The only other person above me was the CEO, and everyone else were my peers. So I didn't really have that type of direct mentorship. I had to find it myself. Karen was the general manager of a casino on the Gulf Coast, and she didn't know me from Adam. She spoke at a scholarship program, and I was so inspired. I went up to her and I said, "You don't know me." I gave her my name, told her where I worked so she'd have some context, and developed a mentorship relationship with her.
So you were intentional?
Yes.
In seeking your mentor?
Because whenever you're in a space where people aren't necessarily able, willing to develop you for whatever reason, you have to be intentional about seeking out those spaces, people, and opportunities.
And I think that's so valuable, so important, because it's been my reality. It's been a lot of our reality. And so what I've found is that there are a number of folks of color, African American, but other, where they're in a situation like that, and over time they leave because it wasn't comfortable. They didn't feel accepted. They didn't feel seen. Clearly, that's a part of the equation. You've actually spoken to something that I've tried to do myself. The way I describe it is, I've been in so many of these rooms, right? I get the question too, are you comfortable here? And the way I've come to describe it is, it's almost like I'm a cameraman. So what I see is what's through the lens of my camera. So I've grown accustomed to seeing a room with majority of folks who don't look like me at all. And so unless I stop and pay attention to it, I don't realize it. I step back and go, right? If someone takes a picture of it or draws it to my attention where you get the raw, then I can see, oh, it's just me here. But because 99% of the times, I'm not getting that broad picture. I've actually grown very comfortable being in that space because I'm just seeing it through my own eyes. I don't get to see. It's just me. And I've grown to act accordingly. And part of it is you got to take charge of it.
Because the important thing to recognize is that you're at the table. And even if you are the only one at the table, you're at the table. And so it's important to, one, use your voice while you're there, and then begin to add value and build the capacity to expand room for others. And you do that either through advocacy, because, for example, I just went to my CEO and I came with facts and I said, there are X% of women as part of this workforce. There are less than 3% of women represented on the leadership team. Why is that so? You always get the answer, well, there are no women that are qualified. Oh, that's baloney. I got another B word I'm going to use for that, but we're going to keep it clean. Instead of taking no for an answer, I said, I've got a solution. Why don't we create a leadership program, and for the first class, have it be specifically for women, and then see what happens. When you give people an opportunity to develop their leadership identity, they begin to see themselves as leaders. I named the class Finding and Developing the Leader in You, because that title was very intentional. I had observed women in leadership positions who weren't recognized as leaders and who did not recognize themselves as leaders. But you have to be willing to advocate, and you've got to be willing to take a chance and take a risk. At that time, I didn't have a PhD. I didn't really even have any formal training in developing a leadership and development program, but I had read books and I knew how to adapt information in a way that I could teach it to others. So I developed that entire curriculum. You don't have to necessarily develop a leadership program in order to make impact. The point is, when you're at the table, be observant, Stand where the opportunities are, get the facts. It's great. My initial PhD dissertation was going to be on the impact of people development programs on the CMS quality scores. All hospitals have to get certain scores, patient satisfaction, employee satisfaction, a lot of different things that go into those quality metrics. My thesis was that if the people are developed and they care and they're nurtured from a leadership perspective, they will provide greater and better care. And I bet there's a correlation between those hospitals that have consistently high scores and very well developed people development programs, leadership development programs. But when I left the health system, I'm like, well, that's okay. Somebody else will have to figure that out. But my whole point is it's important to help people to identify themselves as leaders so that they can increase their own value.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm listening to you, and there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is you have to 100% know who you are and believe in who you are and never let go of that. And at the same time, you also have to 100% let yourself go.
Exactly,
right?
Yes.
And just lean into the moment and allow your training, your experience. It's not, for me, it's not an African-American man. It's what you talked about. It's run the analysis, put the points together, lay it out. And I don't have to lay it out as here's what it's for. I'm laying this out because this is what needs to be done in order to align with the visions of the organization, the goals, the objectives. And here's why it will enable us to reach these growth goals. I don't necessarily need to bring it to every single conversation. If you're doing the right thing, I'm going to come back and get it and get the fact that there needs to be others in the room because folks are also as good as I am or better in some areas.
Because anytime you're the only one at the table, inevitably you become the representative. You have a choice. Who are you going to represent? And how are you going to represent? And are you going to represent in a way that not only shows that you as an individual bring value, but like you say, others like you also bring value. And so that was, for example, my argument about why would we leave underdeveloped talent on the table? You've got a pool of people. Why not develop them? I asked that in a way that not only pointed out that we were leaving talent on the table, but challenged them to come up with a legitimate reason for why a company would not take advantage of its most valuable resource, its human resource.
Exactly.
HR is that name for a reason.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, we could have a whole tangent about some of the issues around the values of diversity in today's society.
That's in my head. You're saying company, you can go, or country.
Right, yeah. And
match
so,
your human resource.
Right. It is antithetical for a society to say that this particular part of society is supreme or has greater value or is more capable when there's no competition. The only time that you can be supreme is when there's no competition. Are you really supreme to begin with?
And the answer is obvious.
It is important, I think, for diversity in all its meanings has a value in human development from a biological perspective. We can look at the royal families of the world when they have constantly inbred. What does that do? Lack of cellular diversity. I may use something incorrect, but you get the point.
Yeah.
But what happens? You have a degeneration of that pool. Likewise, in the broader sense of any corporate community, any civic community, any community, diversity of thought and perspective and value inevitably increases the value of that community. And when you have too much of anything, it lessens the value. And so we have to learn how to articulate that in a way that makes sense to the people that we are advocating to, because most people care about money. Companies care about how can they improve their profit, care about how can they expand their reach. And when we are able to articulate our value in terms of the value that we bring to these communities, to these corporations, we can be more successful. You don't leave them on the side, but you lead with data and you lead with facts that really drive the bottom line of whatever situation you're in.
Okay, let's switch gears for a little bit.
Okay.
Harvard trained, as we talked about, that's the top. Now we're tracking through your career. You've added the coaching. you've got a story going here. I
Yes.
mean, for anyone who's looking on, they're like, you're doing your thing.
Yeah.
I want to be like you. But then something starts to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Life starts to life.
Yes. Yeah. So
Then it's not, what is it? What's the change that took place?
Well, there was a huge disruption in my life. And that's how I like to describe any situation that introduces change. Not all disruptions are bad. They may seem like that at the beginning, but not all disruptions are bad. But to be quite frank, I was on this trajectory of this, great corporate career.
Yep.
Harvard-trained lawyer, executive for a health system, community leader. Everything seemed to be going in this elevated direction. Even though I had a lot from a career perspective, I was no longer intellectually challenged. And I wanted to do more. Disparaging reflection on anyone around me, I just wanted more. And when I got a glimpse of the reward of being able to develop other people through coaching, I knew that I was meant to be more than just a lawyer. I went on this path of beginning to doing speaking and coaching, and I wrote my first book. I wrote a book actually from the leadership development class. Essentially was a compilation of all the information that I taught to the class. I took the curriculum and turned it into...
What was the name of that book?
So that book was Leading
Okay.
Your Life with Excellence. It's no
Okay.
longer in print. It was the first book I wrote. I've always been a writer. I was an English major. I just knew that I wanted more, and I got on that path. Sometimes when you get on a path towards your more, it causes a divergence. I mentioned I just went to my Harvard Law School reunion in 2016. Went to the same reunion. We have it every 5 years. It's gotten a little bit off track since the pandemic, but 2016 was the last one since this year. I had a very pivotal revelation while I was there. There was a breakfast program where the focus was on work-life balance. Lawyers, we struggle with that a lot. We have one of the highest rates of suicide and substance abuse of any profession. We got some challenges. Work-life balance. The speaker, Professor Ronald Sullivan, started out with, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And that was kind of, setting the tone for the conversation. One of my colleagues stood up, female colleagues from the class ahead of me, Katrina Campbell, stood up and gave this just vulnerable soliloquy around that very struggle of finding her place when she was at home. She was worried about what she should be doing at work. When she was at work, worried about what she should be doing at home, and this constant pull of trying to have her cake and eat it too. And it erupted a revelation in my mind about, isn't the point of cake to eat it? Why are we trying to have our cake or eat it? That doesn't make sense. I wrote an article about it called My Love-Hate Relationship with Harvard, published it on Huffington Post. I talked about my personal struggles with balance and some of the struggles I had as a working mom and wife, and how I shouldn't have to choose between these different boxes. Little did I know, 2 weeks later, I would be relieved of that responsibility. 2 weeks later, my ex-husband announced he wanted a divorce. That was a major disruption in my life because that wasn't supposed to happen. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't plan on this.
Yeah.
It was a major disruption. Initially, I was devastated by that. But the more I went through the process, I realized that this disruption was just that, a disruption. I had a choice. I could allow it to derail my life completely, or I could allow it to elevate my life. I developed this concept around disruptive elevation, when life doesn't go as planned, but it goes exactly as it should. It brought me back to this realization that we all have choices in our life. And the choices are the most powerful elements of being a human. That free will, we're given free will, but we have to choose to take it. We're given all of these options, but we have to choose an option, and that power of decision. I love the root word of decision, which is side, the Latin word side, which means to kill or cut off. And while we don't want to kill anybody, sometimes maybe we think that, but anyway, let's not digress. When you make a decision, you cut off all options but the decision, the choice that you make. And that's very powerful. So that helped me to realize that even though my life had not gone as I planned, I now had the opportunity to create the life I desired. And that opened my mind up to the possibility of doing more. Disruptive elevation is just this really beautiful element that we all have in our lives if we are willing to make the choice.
Okay, when we were talking about going up, you mentioned mentors. folks who were there. What about during this period?
This was a period that, honestly, these were decisions I had to make for myself. I did not rely on what other people thought or sought the advice of others, because this was an opportunity for me to truly create for myself what I desired. Up until this point, I had been doing what I thought other people thought I ought to do. I was dressing in the way that a corporate lawyer from Harvard is supposed to dress. I was doing the things that a lawyer was supposed to do. I was doing all these things I was supposed to do instead of really asking myself, who am I and what do I desire to do? So during this period, rather than turning to external, it was an opportunity to turn inward and ask myself, what is the life that I desire and how can I create that?
Okay. So who am I?
Who am I? Who am I? And who have I been up until this point? And who do I get to create? Because that's something important for us to understand as human beings. Who we are or who we've always been is not static or doesn't have to remain static. I like to liken our lives as adults. We have the choice to either have our lives be a ladder where we're on this singular path and we go up and we view if we go down as going in the wrong direction or failure. Or we can view our lives as a jungle gym. Jungle gym was meant to go in different directions. You can go up, you can go down, you can slide, you can swing, you can do all of these things, and it's still a great experience. We truly have the ability to recreate our lives at any point. At this point, I was midlife. I was 44 when I was divorced. I was on the precipice of a new me. I had the choice of either shrinking into who I used to be or cowering because I was no longer that, or I had the choice of creating a whole new me. So I chose to create a new me.
So you touched on a concept of Myron Golden, who is making a distinction between choices and decision. Choices, it's almost like multiple choice, right? I picked this one, it didn't work, let me go this one. Versus sort of what you touched on just now. You made a decision, which means B and C and D and all of the above is eliminated, and I'm going to commit to, right? So you made a decision, and you've got me in suspense because now, of course, I'm wondering, so
yes,
who are you? So that's one, a decision at this time.
Right.
Move geographically.
Yes.
You're leaving your home state.
Yes.
Right?
Well, we had moved to Alabama for a short period.
Okay.
Alabama, which is my personal sunken place. I do not like Huntsville, Alabama. Right. But when that disruption was presented, I had a choice. I can stay here. The only reason I went to Huntsville, Alabama was for his job. So it was place that I desired to go. Yeah,
wasn't even for your job.
Honestly, it just really wasn't my vibe. Right. I had a little bit more personality than that space could hold. So I made two decisions that were very pivotal to where I am today. First, I decided to go back to my maiden name. And I didn't do that out of spite or out of being petty. I literally was driving back. I had come to Atlanta for a meeting, and I was driving back to Huntsville. And I just had kind of a revelation about my name and it correlating to a rebirth. And so I decided that, as part of the divorce proceedings, I would go back to my maiden name because I was becoming me again. And this was an opportunity to create a new me. So that was one physical representation of this decision to create this new life. And the second thing was moving to Atlanta. And so I had a decision to either remain in Huntsville or go somewhere else. And it was very agonizing because at the time, my sons were 14 and 16, and I didn't want to disrupt their lives. Because they were that age, we allowed them to choose. My oldest son decided to live with his dad, and my youngest son decided to live with me. I didn't want to separate them further. But my youngest son and I had a conversation about what I needed to do to position myself to be in the best position for them, because at the time I didn't have a job. I had shut my business down. I did not practice law. I was focused on my family and getting my coaching and speaking business restarted, but it was not where it needed to be yet. I could have played it safe and stayed there, but I decided to take a risk. I remember having a moment. I was like, this is my Esther moment. Perish, I perish. Right. I decided to come to Atlanta. And my youngest son was going to move with me at the last minute. He was convinced to stay. So I came to Atlanta by myself. That was another moment where I almost didn't come because that meant leaving my sons. They were 14 and 16 and they had a father.
Right.
And I didn't view this as abandoning them. We had conversations around it. And I felt at the time that that would have been good for them because young boys needed their dads more. That's how I was able to have some peace with it. There's still times where I wish I had done some things differently, but at the time I felt it was best to go. I moved here to Atlanta. I didn't have a job here either. I had some money that was available and I invested that in my business and did my best to get things up and going. And it didn't quite go as planned. I had the year of 2017. 2017 was the best year ever because I spoke internationally for the second time. I'd spoken internationally before, but I spoke in India, I spoke in London, spent time in Rome. So I was this world traveler. Oh no, this is after the TED Talk. So the TED Talk actually, that's kind of a big. So let me tell you about the TED Talk. So the TED Talk actually, I applied for it prior to being separated. So, life was going on. I was finishing up my dissertation, graduated, and got my doctorate. The actual TEDx talk was during the separation period, because this is a long story too. We separated like 3 times. We separated in April and we separated in September, then in October. But anyway, so this was during the
one of those.
It was a little bumpy, but anyway, we finally got there. So, but this was very tumultuous time. But life had to keep going, and this was my opportunity. I was not going to allow these troubles to keep me from taking the stage, literally. And I did my TEDx talk on the influence of masculine and feminine leadership traits, how we characterize certain things as masculine or feminine, and the effect that has on women being able to be leaders, but also men being able to be good leaders, because being nurturing and collaborative, for example, can be considered a feminine leadership trait, but men need to nurture and collaborate with their teams as well. And of course, an assertive, ambitious woman, she doesn't get called a leader. She gets called something else.
B words you were talking about earlier.
Right. That's another B word. I was challenging the use of these words and pointing out how they have a negative impact on both men and women leaders.
In promotion, I remember someone who was my boss that they would always say, "Not sure if he's strong enough for this position." Like, based on what?
Yeah.
And they didn't want to say it. He actually was more nurturing.
Right.
He's just as strategic, just as tactical, and successful. But because he was nurturing, not sure if he's cut out for this next role.
Ideally, you want a transformational leader, which is going to pull in collaboration and communication to really build the best team. Leading is not just coming up with a plan and telling people what to do. Real leaders are inspiring people to want to do what you've asked them to do because they believe in you and the mission.
They trust you.
And they trust you.
And they trust you because you're actually asking.
Right.
And getting to know folks. So you got the TEDx.
Yes.
You've got making all these. So there's a part of life, that's coming together.
Right. And that's important to recognize. That's why I believe in disruptive elevation. The times in your life where you think it's falling apart is really when it is simply moving to give you permission, to give you space, to give you capacity to expand and to get something greater. But you've got to look at it from that perspective. Even with giving that TEDx talk, it had its own disruptive elevation moment. I didn't know. I was allergic to eyelash glue. This is funny. I had gotten, my cute little eyelashes because, I was going to be on film to make sure that I looked good. I didn't realize I was allergic to eyelash glue. So I got my eyelashes done maybe before I went. And we did our little practice that night. I wake up the next morning and my left eye was swollen shut. And my right eye was halfway open. I looked like Forrest Whitaker. I'm like, come on now, for real. I was the anchor, the last person in the show. I later learned, I was like, why did he put me last? And he put me last because he felt I was going to be the best and he wanted to close with someone strong. So I'm like, all right then, but not like this.
Give you time to get that eye down.
So I got up that morning in a panic And literally my eyes are swollen. This eye is closed. This eye is half shut. And so I didn't want to take Benadryl because I was afraid that might impair my ability to recall. Because TEDx talks you do from memory. Even though you may have a slide, it's not for anything other than to complement what you're going to say. So I was afraid that might impair my memory. So I think I did a little research and I realized I could take a Pepsid. Anyway, I took a Pepsid. And it helped. And I went for a run. I was training. At that time, I was a long distance runner. So I was like, I'm just going to go for a run. So I went for a 10-mile run. Fortunately, by the time I got back, my little eyes were open. And so I was able to get through that. And then when I got dressed, the zipper broke in my dress. I had all these disruptions going on. But I brought it.
I've seen that TEDx, and I can't tell that. And I definitely can't tell about the zipper.
Never turn to the side. Just right to the front. You won't be able to see. The point being is we all can face that type of disruption in our lives. And that was a moment. In any given moment in our lives, we can wake up with our eyes swollen shut on a day that we're supposed to give the best and biggest talk of our lives. And so we have a choice. We have a decision to make. Am I going to allow this to crush me or am I going to push through? That's a concept that's important to adapt anytime you're going through a change because it's not going to be easy. I literally started my entire life over at age 44. It took a lot of courage, but it took a lot of strategy. It took the right mindset to begin with, that I had to get my mind right around what the possibilities were and to really have an abundance mentality and recognizing that the whole world is possible for me, not my whole world has collapsed. Then I had to develop a circle of influence, as I like to call it, and making sure that I had the supportive relationships, that I was supporting other people, but getting the right support and knowing when to switch that lever, then recognizing the systems that we have, because all of us have a system on how we create our excellence. And I like to call it how the sausage is made. Nobody knows how the sausage is made. They just see this great sausage. But when you really begin to pay attention to when I am excelling or when I have achieved my best, how did I do it? Even as small as how we get dressed every day. There's a system for how I get dressed in the morning. I arrange my bathroom cabinets around the order in which I get dressed and do things. That's a system. So we have to recognize our systems and that it's also our plans and strategy. You do take some risk. Healthy risk is really important, but you still need a plan. And you also need to have the agility to flex that plan when it's not going exactly the way I need it to go, but I still got to get there. And then you have to do what I call get big mad. Because a lot of times when things don't go right, we get mad, we get angry, we get upset. You got to have your moment, get those emotions out. But then you've got to get motivated and determined and know that there's a bigger reason that I am on this path. And that's the last thing is you've got to have a why and be driven by something greater than the moment. The moment will get you down.
Right.
You will wake up with your eyes swollen short, your zipper will break in your dress. All these things will happen, but the why for that moment was getting on that stage and delivering my talk with excellence, and I did it.
Yes, as much as I'd love the story to end with a TED Talk, but my guess is you didn't get to ride off into the sunset and live happily ever after.
No.
There's still ups and downs and peaks and valleys. Talk to us a little bit about applying the concepts you just talked about.
I think the first thing we have to do is ditch the idea of a happily ever after. There is no happily ever after. There is the life you create for yourself. And we are not doing or committing our lives to just riding off in the sunset and everything's okay. We're committed or should be committed to living the life that we have, because my concept around our choices is living life in the end. We don't want to wait. We don't want to decide between being successful or fulfilled. We should make decisions that allow us to be successful and fulfilled. And then secondly, life is made to live. It's not about just checking off all the boxes and doing all the things we're supposed to do and being safe. You've got to be willing to take risks. And certainly my life would have been a lot smoother had I not taken the risk of moving to Atlanta and restarting my career here and continuing my business. My life would be a lot easier if I would just pick one horse and ride it. I am an attorney. That's what I do by day, but that's not all that I do. I have a business still that I am building. I am devoted to creating media that enhances and enriches the lives of girls and women. And I do that through my podcast, Living Life in the And. I am producing a documentary based on the experiences that I and some of my colleagues at Harvard Law School have had, because I want to teach other women about the power of choices, the power of decisions. So there's so much more that I can do, but I have to acknowledge that it won't be easy. I have chosen a path that is very fulfilling, but it's also very difficult. And it has its ups and downs. There's a lot of risk to it. And I have to be committed to the why. Because I'm committed to the why, I'm empowered to make decisions that allow me to be a healthcare innovation attorney and the liberated lawyer. That's not by chance. The liberated lawyer is an outward acknowledgement that I'm free to do the things that I love and desire and things that are going to bring me fulfillment. And not just me, I believe that the work that I do has an impact on others.
Right.
I want others to learn from my story.
Let me ask you this. When I saw the Living Life in the And, and then there's a successful and fulfill. So
Right.
I just want you to quickly help me with this.
Yes.
So obviously there is a problem solution. This is a conversation. Is it successful? Yes, but not fulfilled?
Yeah.
Who is that? What does it sound like?
Right. I think a lot of high achieving people are very successful. They've got the bank account to show it. They've got the resume, the titles, the recognition, but deep down they are empty and questioning themselves. Why am I here? Is this it? I've had this moment several times in my life, but more poignantly during the pandemic. I had COVID and I was in isolation, living in an apartment by myself. This was before the vaccine, and you were dying.
I don't know what's
You were
going
dying from
Just get-
right. And so I didn't know, am I going to live or die? And I was asymptomatic, thankfully, but still, I didn't know if I was going to develop symptoms. I had a decision to make. I could sit there and worry about, am I going to die? Or I can make this time have a purpose. And I gave it a purpose. And I began asking myself, if I die in this apartment this week, is this it? And if I live beyond this, how can I do even more? So that really propelled my decision to be successful and fulfilled. This iteration of my messaging was born from this decision. I don't want to be successful and unfulfilled because, had that been my last little time here on earth, I would have died successful. I had the
Right,
resume. I graduated from Harvard. I did this, I did that, but I wasn't fulfilled. Every day now is a commitment to being successful and fulfilled. I don't want to just have this great career that people look at and say, ooh, she had this great career, and be empty on the inside and not be fulfilled and not do something that is more meaningful.
What is that purpose?
Well, I believe that my purpose is to create media that enhances and enriches the lives of women and girls. That is a purpose. That is the manifestation of the
That's one of
purpose.
the clear.
That is a manifestation. I have always had an ability to tell stories. I used to be, well, I still am a writer. I used to write more often. I've always been a writer. For the past 10 years or so, I've committed to being a speaker. And I believe that my voice is a gift. I was a voice at the table when I was an executive, and now I'm using my voice in a different way. Ultimately, my purpose is using my voice to empower other women to make choices. Men can learn from it too, but my experience is that of a woman, so that's what I focus on. And I believe that is my purpose. So it shows up in everything that I do.
Okay, good. So now it's time to take another trip. And then we're going to hop into my DeLorean.
All right.
And we're going back to the future. We're going to go 10 years out. And we're going to do the visualization thing. So tell me, what's Stephanie doing?
This is actually an activity that I do daily in some ways. I have this 6-part meditation that I do. The next to the last thing is looking at a vision for your life. I think about, what is it that I want to accomplish? So I close my eyes literally and I can see it. I see me, continuing on this path of developing media. I'm going to have my own media company. I have a media company. It's just going to be bigger, and so I see myself being able to harvest the seeds that I've been planting and nurturing over these past few years, and being able to do that in a way that is fulfilling to me personally, but also reaching the people that I desire to serve through my voice. I see that happening. I see, maybe I'm at Sundance, maybe I'm at Cannes, I don't know. I believe that the documentaries that I create will be award winning, not simply for getting the award, but for the impact.
Right. And if you look closely enough, you'll see that Moxie production.
Oh, you see?
All right. So let's hop back in. Let's stop off at 30-year-old Stephanie, because we've been in the future. Now we got to have a little chat. What advice would you give her?
To be unafraid of exercising the power of your choice. Because even though at 30 years old, I was trained as an advocate, I had not yet stepped into being an advocate for myself. And while I often reflect on the past and in some ways don't necessarily wish to change it, because it happened for a reason, I do wish that I had just learned to be a better advocate for myself and to be more willing to challenge the expectations of me as a mother, as a wife, as an attorney, from the perspective of just exploring different ways to innovate how I did those things. Because there's no one way. And I think for myself as well as externally, I was kind of put in this box to be those things in a way that women before me had gone, but we were not the same.
Right.
And so that's something I often reflect on. And that's what I want to tap into in this documentary, the importance of being a better advocate for yourself in different ways. And that's not being antagonistic, because I think sometimes, particularly for women, when we advocate, it's taken as being antagonistic, but it's just advocacy. Of course, there's a way to do it that honors those to whom you're advocating or for whom you're advocating. But I think that's really important.
I wonder to what degree a component of it is a firstborn. I know for me, I never think of myself as a victim. Let's get it done. No excuses. And so as I'm listening to you, I thought that's something I probably would need to do as well. Not because I felt I'm being taken advantage. It's just, I'm just going. I'm just doing. I'm just playing by the rules because that's what you do. You got a lot of folks counting on you. And so in some ways, you don't advocate because you're like.
But even in that instance, you still do more for others when you show up as your true self and when you are living your life authentically. And so that's something that I constantly talk about. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Because what I desire now, especially to teach my two sons, I don't have daughters, I only have sons, but still I can teach them things that will help them in their lives. But the thing that I want them to see from me is my willingness to be unafraid and try new things and to deviate from this path that somebody else said I ought to be on to create a path for myself. Because when I was raising my sons, I raised them to be critical thinkers and to use the guidance I provided to make decisions for themselves. And I think it has worked out pretty well. And in terms of, I'm able to see that. It was a time I was like, oh, Lord, I don't know, Jesus. Yes, I'm overwhelmed with joy when I see who they are and who they're becoming.
Absolutely.
And when I hear them reflect on things that I've taught them and how they've applied it for themselves. Because I never told them, you need to be this, you can't be that. I would have liked for one or both of my sons to have gone to Harvard to grad. I would have, and it's still possible. One of them may go to Harvard Law School. But I wanted them to choose their own path. So I think that a lesson I can teach them is by advocating for myself and creating a life for myself that they see they can do that. And obviously you have to do all these things responsibly. You can't totally disregard your responsibilities to others and how other people feel. This is always in a way that
back to your aunt. It's back to your aunt.
You can choose yourself and choose your family.
That's it.
You can choose your career and choose your family. But it's all about being willing to innovate so that it's not all or nothing.
Okay, we gotta leave. We gotta leave. We gotta come back to the present. For that one person who's listening to you, and this just hits multiple levels, What advice would you give?
It's a quote that I think has very great significance as guidance, and that's all who wonder are not lost. And I think so many times we can believe that, I'm wondering. This is not right. This is a failure. I am off path. I am off script. I am not doing things the way my parents did it. I'm not doing things. We can think all these things and we think we're wondering or we think we're lost. When in fact, we are discovering, exploring, and creating new paths.
You did not disappoint. That was a lot of fun. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing, teaching.